So anyway, so do some reflection on 2022. How did you do? In what areas did you grow? Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. In what areas do you still need some more work in? And then once you do, kind of some reflection, and I would encourage you all to legit schedule some time, block off some time in your calendar to do that reflection. It is so important, y'all, so that we don't go into the next year at the same level or worse. Because as I've stated many, many times in the podcast, unaddressed emotional issues don't get better over time. They actually compound. So EQ gangsters, on my way to therapy, my jiu-jitsu class, and I want to share some thoughts with you that I've been working through with some of my coaching clients that I think is important to capture around the end of the year, new year time frame. I'm not sure when this particular episode is going to drop because I try to knock out a handful of episodes to stay ahead of when they're due. So, but I still think that whenever this drops will still be within the time frame that I think will be still very, very relevant. Want to do a big shout out to our sponsor of this podcast, classicalconversations.com/Gibbons. We have had, they've got one more week in the semester before their semester's done. And my wife is the sophomore in high school tutor/director. We call it in the classical conversations world, we call sophomore high school challenge. So this is my daughter's in challenge 2, and which is again basically a sophomore in high school, and we have just been so thankful for all the stuff that she's been learning. I watch her now. She was hiding behind our legs to do a presentation like show and tell when she was a little kid, and they do basically presentations in front of their peers. Their classes of size are 5 to 10 kids, maybe 12 kids, maybe, and they do presentations every single week for every year. And all that accumulation of practice and repetition that they've been doing has been phenomenal. Now our daughter, as a sophomore in high school, loves giving presentations and is very confident when she gives presentations. So I'm so thankful. And another huge thing is, again, I mentioned briefly an episode or two ago that we returned from a high school retreat, and a lot of the kids that were there were classical conversations homeschool students. And the gentleman who facilitated the weekend, it's a couple, but the guy who kind of was the main facilitator, what I love about the program is they teach the kids how to think, not what to think, how to think. In public school, here's all the content, memorize it, perform on a test, and move on, and which I was able to do very well at memorization, so I did very well in school, but I didn't have the tools of learning. And quite frankly, to be honest with you, even though I went to West Point, I didn't even learn the tools of learning at West Point in college. It wasn't until my daughter going through her school, homeschool, that I learned the tools of learning. So, for example, I'm not going to do a deep dive, just so you know, one of the tools is called the 5 common topics. You can research this stuff. These are from Aristotle, Plato days, like thousands of years old tools, the 5 common topics. And then in the high school years, junior high school is 5 common topics, but then the last year or two, it's called the 5 canons of rhetoric. Again, won't won't go into it now, but it's phenomenal skinny that can help anyone learn how to think, which is the podcast that my wife does, and filter it through a brain cell, which is kind of funny. My wife teaches folks how to think logically, and I teach folks how to handle their emotions better. So anyway, kind of funny. So something that I've been doing with my coaching clients is, kind of wrapping up the year, is, which I want to encourage each of you to do as well, is to do an audit, an after action review, is a term we use in the military, a reflection of how you did emotionally this year in 2022. How did you do emotionally? What did you do well emotionally this year? How did you grow emotionally this year? And then you can start getting a little bit more granular in the area of emotions. How did you do with boundaries this year, personally and professionally? How did you do in conflict emotionally this year? Did you do well? What could you have done better? How could you improve? What did you learn from the conflict that you had and experienced this year? How about triggers? How many times were you triggered this year? How many times were you triggered each month or each week? To what degree were you triggered on a scale from 1 to 10? Did you go all the way to a 10 every time you were triggered? When did you become aware of your trigger, or when you got triggered? Were you self-aware enough to see it coming on? Were you like me in a couple different intense triggers? I didn't realize it until I was coming out of the trigger. How about how long did you stay triggered? Were you able to identify, process, and manage those emotions when you were triggered? How often did you validate and affirm other people throughout the year? Did you do it monthly? Did you do it weekly? I just did a presentation to an Air Force unit, a group of Air Force non-commissioned officers, NCOs, their leaders, and that was one of the questions I asked them. When's the last time you felt seen, heard, validated, and affirmed? And it was crickets. It does not happen hardly ever. And then I said, okay, well, how many of your junior leaders that you all lead, if I ask them, how often does your leader, i.e. the folks in the room, make you feel seen, heard, validated, valued, and affirmed? And of course it got library quiet. So anyway, do some reflection on 2022. How did you do? In what areas did you grow? Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. In what areas do you still need some more work in? And then once you do, kind of some reflection, and I would encourage you all to legit schedule some time, block off some time in your calendar to do that reflection. It is so important, y'all, so that we don't go into the next year at the same level or worse, because as I've stated many, many times in the podcast, unaddressed emotional issues don't get better over time, they actually compound. So if you fail to address, if you don't address your unaddressed emotions and emotional injuries, those will get worse over time. And it's always a great time of year at the end of the year, beginning of the new year, to do some reflection so that jumping into 2023, you can be more aware and informed going into 2023. Knowledge alone is not good enough. Just listening to this podcast, for that matter, is not good enough. Just reading a book or books or listening to a bunch of podcasts. Heck, getting certified. Y'all know I'm passionate about this. Getting certified. Getting a degree in this space does not mean that you're emotionally healthy. It just means you know a truckload more and you have a lot more grammar, a lot more knowledge about a particular area. It doesn't mean that you've applied this stuff in your own life. In fact, I interviewed a guest today on my podcast. The episode will be coming out here shortly. He is the people pleaser or the people displeaser on Instagram and TikTok. He's got phenomenal skinny. He's a coach, and for many years, he had some great sales skills. He was even doing dating, relationship advice and coaching, all while being emotionally unhealthy. And it wasn't until he realized some of this stuff and had an epiphany that, oh snap, man, I've been doing all this stuff and I'm not emotionally healthy myself. When he got triggered with some stuff, you guys can listen to the podcast. It's a great podcast, really insightful. It's got some really insightful skinny. So again, don't think that just listening to the podcast, reading a book, listening to TED Talks, whatever, and all of a sudden I know all about EQ. You may be more knowledgeable about emotional intelligence, about emotional health, about mental health. That doesn't mean you're emotionally healthy or mentally healthy. It's all about the application. Setting aside time for reflection, setting aside time to ask yourself some of these hard questions, and being open and honest. That was another big point he talked about today. Being honest enough with yourself, not lying to yourself about where are you really at. One of my psychometric scientific EQ assessment that I give to my executives, one of the areas of emotional intelligence is called reality testing. What is your ability to see reality objectively versus, oh, no, I'm emotionally healthy, man. I don't have any emotional issues. Are you really? Do that reflection and that hard work, that hard reflection, intentional reflection, so that 2023 can be a much better year. So now goal setting. Set goals for 2023. What are some of those emotional goals that you want to set? I know we're all about maybe the physical goals, the financial goals, the business goals. I want to make this amount of money, save this amount, not realizing that your emotional health impacts and affects every single goal you do or do not hit. Name the area. Finances, emotions affected. Fitness, emotions affected. Family, emotions affected. Professionally, emotions affected. Business, emotions. So I would encourage you, set some emotional goals. What boundaries? Do you need to set some new boundaries? Do you need to readjust some boundaries? Do you need to work on some triggers? Do you need to get a little more serious, double down in some of your emotional health stuff? How about self-awareness? Do you need to set some self-awareness exercises? In what areas of your emotional intelligence, your emotional growth, do you need to set and be more intentional at so that you can have a better, more emotionally healthy 2023? And I would encourage you, just like regular goal setting, don't set 45 goals. Oh, I'm going to get these 45 different emotional goals I'm going to set. No, set maybe one goal in each of the different areas, and then set one action step for those different areas. One action step. not 30 action steps. So it's got to be easy. The goals and the action steps have to be baby steps. That's just at least been my experience. You can read books like Atomic Habits and different things for the deep dives and how to do all that stuff. But I just encourage you to just take baby steps, and maybe you just do one goal and one action step for the first quarter, and then reevaluate after 90 days. Okay, see where I'm at. And then boom, set another goal and another action step. Boom, because growing your emotional health, getting emotionally healthier and growing your emotional intelligence is not an overnight deal. It's not an event. It's not a podcast episode. It's not a book. And then boom, you're all of a sudden emotionally healthy. It takes time, reflection, work, emotional work. So just wanted to share those exercises to do some reflection on 2022. What did you do well? What could you do better? And then 2023, what are some goals that you can set to make 2023 the best year of your life? Thank you guys so much for rating, reviewing, subscribing, sharing. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally.